Morning, all. All right, so the 1988-89 season, as we continue our look through the NHL's history, the dominant storyline for 88-89 was the Wayne Gretzky trade. August 9th of 1988, Wayne Gretzky's traded to LA, along with Marty McSorley and Mike Krushelnyski for Jimmy Carson, Marty Gelinas, 3 first-round draft picks, and $15 million in cash, because Peter Pocklington needed some cash. But there's going to be a video today on this. This trade, to me, it deserves its own video, so I'll mention it here. I'll talk about it again as we go through the storylines of that season. But the Gretzky trade is such a big storyline. I feel like it deserves its own video, which I'll add to this playlist. So the Adams Division that year is won by the Montreal Canadiens. They finished 53-18-9, 115 points, trailing only Calgary in the overall standings. 315 goals scored, 218 goals against. Bobby Smith, Larry Robinson, and Mike McPhee all represent Montreal in the All-Star game that year. The Boston Bruins, 37-29-14 record, 88 points, 289 goals scored, 256 goals against. Cam Neely, Reggie Lemelin, and Glenn Wesley are the representatives for the Boston Bruins at that All-Star game. The Buffalo Sabres go 38-35-7, 291 goals scored, 299 goals against, 83 points for them. Phil Housley, their lone representative at the All-Star game. The Hartford Whalers, 37-38-5, 299 goals scored, 290 goals against, 79 points. They're represented at the All-Star game by Kevin Dineen. The Quebec Nordiques missed the playoffs again, and the record gets worse. 61 points, a record of 27-46-7. 269 goals scored, 342 goals against. Walt Podubny is the representative at the All-Star game that year. Player that I like. There's just not been enough there for me to do a career video on him. The Patrick Division is won in the regular season by the Capitals. Record of 41-29-10. 92 points, 305 goals for, 259 goals against. Both Scott Stevens and Mike Ridley go to the All-Star game representing the Capitals that year. The Penguins, 40-33-7 record, 347 goals scored, 349 goals against, 87 points. Paul Coffey, Mario Lemieux, and Rob Brown, the representatives for the Penguins at that All-Star game. And the Penguins finally above the playoff line for the first time in, I think it's 6 years. Been a while, and they look pretty good. The Rangers, 37-35-8 record, 82 points, 310 goals scored, 307 goals against. And Brian Mullen is a representative at the All-Star game. The Philadelphia Flyers, 36-36-8 record, 80 points, 307 goals scored, 285 goals against. Rick Tocchet goes to the All-Star game for Philadelphia that season. The New Jersey Devils, 27-41-12 record, 281 goals scored, 325 goals against, 66 points. So after this great season they'd had in 87-88, the New Jersey Devils fall right off the map again. Sean Burke and John McClain are the representatives for New Jersey at the All-Star game. Burke had quite the run there early, but it's not that sustainable, but he'll be back. The New York Islanders, 28-47-5 record, 265 goals scored, 325 goals against, 61 points. Pat LaFontaine, the representative at the All-Star game, and it's just a matter of players from that dynasty, their careers coming to an end, the management not being as good as it was the previous decade, and the Islanders' descent really and truly bottoms out there. But we hit some bottoms in the 90s and 2000s as well. So, tough times for the Islanders ahead. The Norris Division is won by the Detroit Red Wings. They finished 34-34-12. So, a 500 team wins the division, 80 points, 313 goals scored, 316 goals against. Steve Yzerman is the lone representative for the Detroit Red Wings at the All-Star game. St. Louis, 33-35-12 record, 78 points, 275 goals scored, 285 goals against. And Brett Hull is their representative at the All-Star game. The Minnesota North Stars, 27-37-16, 70 points. 258 goals scored, 278 goals against, and Dino Ciccarelli is their representative at the All-Star game. The Chicago Blackhawks, 27-41-12 record. So the same record as New Jersey here, 66 points, 297 goals scored, 335 goals against, and Dave Manson is their representative at the All-Star game. The Toronto Maple Leafs, 28-46-6 record, 62 points, so they do miss the playoffs, 1 point ahead of the Islanders and the Nordiques for last overall. 259 goals scored, 342 goals against. Gary Lehman is the representative at the All-Star game. Had himself quite the career year. And so, yeah, he's their rep there. The Smythe Division's won by Calgary, and they're easily the best team in the division that year. 117 points, 54-17-9 record, 354 goals scored, 226 goals against. Joe Mullen, Gary Suter, Joe Newendike, and Mike Vernon all go to the All-Star game for the Flames that year. And I'm still surprised that this is the only year the Flames win the Stanley Cup in their history, because this was an excellent team in the late 80s, early 90s. The LA Kings, 42-31-7 record, 91 points, 376 goals scored, 335 goals against. They're represented at the All-Star game by Luc Robitaille, Steve Duchesne, Bernie Nichols, and Wayne Gretzky. So Gretzky arriving in LA turns their fortunes around, and they finish ahead of the Oilers. The Oilers, an 84-point team that year, 38-34-8 record, 325 goals scored, 306 goals against. Their representatives at the All-Star game, Kevin Lowe, Yari Curry, Grant Fuhr, Mark Messier, and Jimmy Carson. So that first year, that trade didn't look quite as lopsided as it does now in retrospect. The Vancouver Canucks do make the playoffs, 74-point season, 33-39-8 record. 251 goals scored, 253 goals against. They were stingy defensively, and Paul Reinhardt's their representative at the All-Star game. I was actually quite proud of that 74-point Canucks team. They had a 7-game winning streak that year. They were pretty good. The Winnipeg Jets, 26-42-12 record, 64 points, 300 goals scored, 355 goals against. They're represented at the All-Star game by Dave Ellett. So I've talked about the Gretzky trade a bit. As I said, there will be a video on the channel later today. Gretzky also gets his 9th Hart Trophy that year. He is the first NHL player to have his name on one trophy 9 times. Guy Lafleur would exit retirement to play for the New York Rangers, which looked weird. It still does look weird to look at those pictures looking back. September 6th of 1988, the Blues trade Doug Gilmour, Steve Bozek, and Mark Hunter to the Flames for Mike Bullard and Craig Cox. So this is a trade that the Flames win. Just going to go out on a limb with that one. November 12th of 1988, the Buffalo Sabres trade Tom Barrasso to the Penguins for Doug Bodger and Darren Shannon. So a bit of a surprise when that one went through, in that you would have thought Buffalo might have been able to get more back, but Pittsburgh ends up really liking Tom Barrasso and having him there. March 29th of 1989, Brian Leetch sets a rookie defenseman record with his 23rd goal. He had a fantastic rookie season, looked like a veteran right out of the gate. March 30th of 1989, Mario Lemieux scores his 13th shorthanded goal of the season. That breaks Gretzky's record of 12. And yeah, Mario shows in the season that he can get right up into Gretzky's records. He gets pretty darn close during some of these seasons. April 1st of 1989, Paul Coffey scores his 30th goal of the season with Pittsburgh and becomes the first defenseman in NHL history to record a 30-goal season with 2 different teams. May 19th of 1989, Larry Robinson of the Montreal Canadiens is the first player to play 200 playoff games. He would end up in LA not long after that, but he does reach that 200 playoff games, all with Montreal. March 22nd of 1989, Clint Malarchuk, the scary incident with Clint Malarchuk. His throat is cut by a skate. It's a random incident, and his life was saved on the ice. It was an absolutely dramatic, horrific incident. And he's back on the ice playing 10 days later. Like, he returns 10 days later. This is one of those times where we can tell that things have changed. I would think that if that happened to a player now and they're coming back, that you'd have to do all the psychological screenings and everything. Malarchuk, of course, has written a book on his career and on the after effects of that, and it's a fascinating read, so I'm throwing that out there. But Malarchuk was one of my favorite goaltenders at the time. It was a scary incident. I was happy to see him back, but in retrospect, he should have had more time to work on the psychological parts of the injury. Physically, he may have healed up, but there's that other side of it. The LA Kings become the first team to sell arena naming rights. They change it from the Forum to the Great Western Forum. It has nothing to do, I'm sure, with the $15 million in cash they had to give the Oilers to pick up Wayne Gretzky. But Wayne Gretzky going to LA changes the game south of the border. This is also the first year that every arena has board ads. So if you want to watch a hockey game and see it without any ads on the board, you have to go back before this season. It wasn't as prevalent as it is now, though, and it definitely wasn't those digital ads they have now. So trophy winners, the Art Ross goes to Mario Lemieux of the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Masterton goes to Tim Kerr of the Philadelphia Flyers, who I've done a career video on. Tim Kerr, one of my all-time favorites. The Calder goes to Brian Leetch of the New York Rangers. The Conn Smythe goes to Al McInnes of the Calgary Flames. The Selkie goes to Guy Carbonneau of the Montreal Canadiens, as now he's camping out with it like Bob Gainey had a decade earlier. The Hart Trophy goes to Wayne Gretzky of the LA Kings. The Jack Adams first goes to Pat Burns of the Montreal Canadiens. The Norris goes to Chris Chelios of the Montreal Canadiens. The King Clancy Award goes to Brian Trottier of the New York Islanders. The Lady Byng goes to Joe Mullen of the Calgary Flames. I believe that's the second straight. The Lester Pearson Award goes to Steve Yzerman of the Detroit Red Wings. He had himself a year on the ice. Yzerman, absolutely fantastic totals, but we would see the success for the team arrive when he was a different player than the one he was in the late 80s here. The Jennings Trophy goes to Patrick Waugh and Brian Hayward again. The Vezina Trophy goes to Patrick Waugh of the Montreal Canadiens. So your league all-stars, named at the end of the season, of course. First line center, Mario Lemieux of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Second line center, Wayne Gretzky of the LA Kings. On the left side, Luc Robitaille of LA is the first team all-star. Gerard Gallant of the Detroit Red Wings is second team. On the right side, Joey Mullen of Calgary's first team all-star, and Yari Curry of the Edmonton Oilers is the second team all-star. On the blue line, Chris Chelios of Montreal and Paul Coffey of the Pittsburgh Penguins, your first team all-stars. Second team all-stars, Al McInnes of the Calgary Flames and Ray Bourque of the Boston Bruins. In net, Patrick Waugh is the first team all-star, and Mike Vernon of the Calgary Flames is your second team all-star. So looking at the stats, Mario Lemieux does lead the way in scoring, 76 games, 85 goals, 114 assists for 199 points. That is as close as anybody ever got to Wayne Gretzky's 200-point threshold, and nobody would get that close again. So Lemieux's best statistical season, he misses 4 games, just misses the 200-point mark. Wayne Gretzky, 78 games, 54 goals, also 114 assists, 168 points. Steve Yzerman plays all 80 games, 65 goals, 90 assists, 155 points. Bernie Nichols, career year for Bernie Nichols with the Kings, 79 games, 70 goals, 80 assists, 150 points. He would never get anywhere near that again. Rob Brown for the Pittsburgh Penguins, 68 games, 49 goals, 66 assists, 115 points. Brown kind of came out of nowhere and just had an amazing season that year. Paul Coffey with Pittsburgh as well, 75 games, 30 goals, 83 assists, 113 points. Joe Mullen in Calgary, 79 games, 51 goals, 59 assists, 110 points. Yari Curry with the Oilers, 76 games, 44 goals, 58 assists, 102 points. Jimmy Carson for the Oilers, 80 games, 49 goals, 51 assists, 100 points. And for the first time in a while, we have a top 10, which includes somebody with less than 100 points. And it's Luc Robitaille, 78 games, 46 goals, 52 assists for 98 points. Goaltenders, your wins leader is Mike Vernon, 37, 6-5 record, 897 save percentage, no shutouts. Patrick Waugh of Montreal, 33, 5-6, 908 save percentage, 4 shutouts. Ron Hextall in Philadelphia, 30, 28-6 record, 891 save percentage. Kelly Hrudey splits the season between the Islanders and the LA Kings, and he's the first goaltender to record 10 or more wins with 2 different teams in the same season. So he goes 28, 28-5, 882 save percentage, 1 shutout. John Van Beesbrook with the Rangers, 28, 21-4 record, 881 save percentage, no shutouts. We get to the playoffs, the first round. LA beats the Oilers in 7 games. An absolutely epic series, Gretzky knocking out his former team. The other divisional matchup is Calgary-Vancouver. Vancouver finished 43 points behind Calgary. They forced Game 7 and nearly got it done. It takes until overtime of Game 7, and Calgary does knock out Vancouver. St. Louis beats Minnesota in 5 games. Chicago beats Detroit in 6 games. So Detroit loses in that first round, and this becomes a bit of a storyline in the 90s as well, Detroit being a higher seed and losing those rounds. Then out east, you've got Pittsburgh sweeping the New York Rangers, 4 straight. Philadelphia beats Washington 4-2 because Washington doesn't do well when they're a top seed. Boston beats Buffalo 4-1, and Montreal beats Hartford 4 straight games. Then we get to the division finals. Calgary beats LA 4 straight, so Gretzky's run with the Kings gets him out of the first round, but he can't overcome the Flames in the second round. Chicago beats St. Louis 4-1. So the 66-point Chicago Blackhawks end up being the one that comes out of the division for the Norris to play against the powerhouse Calgary Flames. Philadelphia beats Pittsburgh 4-3, so it goes the full 7 games there. And Montreal beats Boston 4-1 because psych. See, Boston beats them the one time, and then nope. So that's 19 out of 20 series won by Montreal against Boston. In the conference finals, as previously mentioned, it is Calgary, it is Chicago out west. The Flames end up getting to a 1-0 series lead with a 3-0 win. Chicago answers with a 4-2 win, but Calgary goes to Chicago, wins both of the next 2 games, 5-2 and 2-1 in overtime respectively. Then they win at home 3-1 to win the series 4-1. Philadelphia beats Montreal in Montreal 3-1 to win the first game, but Montreal answers with a 3-0 win. They go to Philadelphia, they win both games by scores of 5-1 and 3-0. Philadelphia then wins in Montreal 2-1. Montreal then wins in Philadelphia 4-2 to win the series in 6. These teams don't like each other. Montreal and Philadelphia in the playoffs, they don't like each other. They don't get along. It's just how it is. In the final, Calgary wins at home 3-2. Montreal then wins in Calgary 4-2. Montreal wins at home in double overtime 4-3 because Patrick Roy, so overtime. Calgary wins in Montreal 4-2. Calgary then wins at home 3-2 before going back to Montreal and winning in Montreal 4-2. The second team in history to win the Stanley Cup on Montreal ice. And so that is an unusual sighting at that point that any team's going to hold up the Stanley Cup in Montreal, and it's not the Habs. Calgary wins 4-2 in that series to make that happen. Al McInnes had himself a great final, 4 goals, 5 assists, and wins the Conn Smythe Trophy. Joe Mullen, 5 goals, 3 assists. Joel Otto, 2 goals, 6 assists for him. Doug Gilmour, 4 goals, 3 assists, and Mike Vernon had an .899 save percentage in the final. Chris Chelios, a goal and 6 assists for him. Bobby Smith, 3 goals, 2 assists. Mike McPhee, a goal and 3 assists. Claude Lemieux had 2 goals and an assist. And Larry Robinson had 2 goals and an assist as well. Patrick Roy had a .908 save percentage. So really strong playoff run for Patrick Roy that falls short against a Calgary Flames team that won the President's Trophy and then won their way through the playoffs. Wasn't easy, but the first round was tough for them against Vancouver. They get through the second and third round relatively quickly, but that final was a tough one. That was a great final. That was one of my favorite finals up until that point as watching hockey. And again, the debate that we had at school was, well, Montreal's got a bunch of cups. Do we want them to win another? It'd be nice to see the Flames win one. And they did. And again, the biggest surprise from that era is that Calgary only won 1 Stanley Cup. It felt like they were going to take over. The Stanley Cup would just stay in Alberta, just South Alberta, not Northern Alberta. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.